Hey, good morning, it's Owen Bigland. This is the Inside Edge video blog. Time for another one of my video blogs here on the psychology, the mindset, the attitude that you have to be successful, whether it's buying Vancouver real estate or buying stocks, investing, saving for your retirement. And I do these every month or so. It's really my bread and butter for my Inside Edge video blog here. And especially in this time, we're in February 2017, there's still a lot of news out there about the Vancouver market being overheated. We're still in a strong seller's market, but when's the bubble going to burst? 2017 could be the year. So I wanted to, I've been kind of thinking of ways over the last month or two and how to put a different spin on things here. And I thought this time, I would give you some stories that pertain to me, to my investing, real estate investing over the last 30 years, which is coming up to 30 years. I bought my first investment property 29 years ago. It was a one-bedroom, one-bath on Ackroyd Road in Richmond, just off number 3 road. I still own that property today. It's long since been paid off. I just did a full renovation on the unit about 18 months ago, and I've got a good long-term tenant in there that's paying me a nice rent on it. So I thought what I do now is to give you a little more transparency, and you'll learn a lot more about this in the book. I've been plugging my book now for the last little while, and I'm going to continue to do that over the next 6 to 8 weeks because my book is getting ready to be released, hopefully by the end of February or early March. And I've got several chapters in there about my personal investing roadmap and history and what I've done over the years. So I'm going to give you a couple examples here, and some of these I blogged about. So one I did blog about was about 15 months ago. I put a blog last October of 2015. I did a video blog saying that I had just added another investment property to my portfolio. Not groundbreaking news because I have consistently bought properties every 2.5 to 3 years. I just continue to buy and hold investment units. I don't care if the market is a buyer's market, a seller's market, a balanced market. It doesn't matter to me. If I find the right unit that will fit into my portfolio, and it's in the right neighborhood, the right location, it makes sense financially for me, and I've got the down payment and the money ready to go, and I've always got pre-approvals from the bank. I always keep what we call a loaded suitcase ready to go so I can put an offer in, then I buy it. So I did a blog October 2015 how I had just bought another investment unit in the Mount Pleasant Olympic Village area. And you can go back and watch that blog. It was a one-bedroom unit, about 510 square feet with a balcony, no parking. I paid $368,000 for the unit. Now, the story that I want to tell you here is it's worked out beyond my wildest belief. I mean, when I bought that unit in October of 2015, the market was still pretty hot at that time. A lot of people were saying, geez, $368,000 for a one-bedroom, no parking. That's pretty high dollar you're paying there. But it made sense for my portfolio, and I wanted to get into a unit, as I blogged about, without parking. I wanted to start experimenting with getting smaller units, no parking, and the type of demographic, a renter demographic I was going to appeal to there. Now, what happened essentially, I bought the unit in October. This unit was almost complete when I bought it. It was a pre-sale, but it was a little different. The developer waited until the building was about 90% finished. The developer was Bastion in this case, and then sold the units. So I was able to buy the unit in October and get the keys on it in April. So it was a pretty quick turnaround time. So to make a long story short, by the time I got the keys on that in late April or early May, I can tell you that I was probably up anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000 on that unit. I can tell you the tax assessment now on this unit that I paid $368,000 is now taxed assessed at $505,000. And there was a similar unit that had sold to mine that sold for $508,000 back in August of 2016. So I'm up, let's call it $100,000 on this unit. Now, this is the psychology of a long-term investor who plays 9-inning baseball instead of 1-inning baseball. A lot of people, when they bought the unit, 6 months later, they were up $100,000 on it, we'd be tempted to sell that unit. And the number of letters that I got last spring and summer that came to my home about this particular investment unit I bought, wanting me to sell. Some of the letters, they knew what I had paid for the unit. The realtor can look at the history. We're saying, why don't you cash out, sell the unit, you take your $100,000 and leave. Of course, I wasn't interested in selling the property, just like I've never been interested in selling any of the properties I bought as investment units. I play 9 innings of baseball. The $100,000 increase I got is beyond what I thought I would get for the first 6 or 7 months of owning it. But it'll look like peanuts compared to 20 or 25 years down the road when I keep it and then decide to sell it with a tenant paying down all my expenses for the next 25 years. So, I wasn't weighed or strayed to try and sell that unit. And a lot of people, though, unfortunately are. Some of the letters I got, of course, from these realtors, they want to get a listing, of course, but, take your money and run on it. But, this is the way it's been with all the units I bought. I buy them, I'm a long-term investor. I don't play 1 or 2 innings. This particular unit in Olympic Village, I've got a tenant in there for $19.50 a month. I put 20% down on the unit, so the income I'm getting from my tenant is enough to cover pretty much everything. My principal, my interest payments, my property taxes, and my maintenance fees. So it's what I call the ghost ship analogy. You put the 20% down, set that unit out to sea, and over time you'll get the capital gains, and every month you're chipping down the principal on it for a 20% down payment. And as I say, in 25 years, that $100,000 gain will be far more than you can ever dream. So I'm a long-term investor, so I wasn't swayed at all or thought, even a second thought, about selling the unit for a quick $100,000. Now, I went back, I wanted to tell you though that I've been a real estate investor for close to 30 years now. I can tell you that I took a quick little inventory of some of the units that I've bought. Some are principal residents that I've lived in and bought, but many of them are investment properties. And I can tell you that many of the properties, more than half that I bought, some I bought as pre-sales, some I bought as assignments. I would say at least half from the time I bought them, at some point in time, I was underwater on that property. In other words, I bought it, and a year or 2 later, the unit was worth less than what I paid for it. And that's just the way I work and what most savvy investors and people who think long-term do. They just systematically buy. They don't worry about what the day-to-day market fluctuations are, or there's a crash coming just around the corner. Thank God I didn't listen to that, because for as long as I've been in Vancouver real estate, close to 30 years, there's always been talk of this big 50 or 60% crash. It's never happened. Maybe one day it will, I don't know, but thank God I'm up 300 or 400% on a lot of these properties. Even if we got a 30 or 40% correction, it's not going to make any dent in my portfolio. But I've systematically bought every 2-3 years, and many times, as I say, I bought the unit, and within a year or 2, I'm down $50,000. So I'll give you a couple of quick examples here from my own portfolio. 20 years ago, I bought a townhouse, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath townhouse, built by Polygon in Richmond's Terra Nova neighborhood. So this was one of the first developments that went into Terra Nova, which is at Westminster Highway and number 1 Road. I loved the location. I knew they were going to build a mall there and luxury homes all around the area. When I first bought it, was farmland out there. I bought this brand new from Polygon. I paid, this is 20 years ago almost to the day, I paid $209,000 plus GST. For a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet, front yard, little backyard, 2-car garage. Sounds cheap now, but I can tell you back 20 years ago, $209,000, people thought I was nuts. 1,100 square foot, 1,150 square foot townhouse in farmland out in Richmond, and you're paying $209,000? You're crazy. I bought the unit and put a tenant into it. Now, I can tell you that within about 2 years later, that townhouse continued to appreciate a bit. I'd say 2 years later, those units were selling for probably around $230,000, $235,000, not much. But a couple of years after that, the market took a correction. And I can tell you 5 years after I bought that townhouse, comparable units, the exact same townhouse as mine, were selling in the low 170s. 172, 173. And they stayed at that point for a good 18 months or so. Then they kind of gradually treaded water in the 180s and 190s. They shot back up again into the 260s, 270s. I was up again on them. Took a correction again, 2008. And then kind of been off to the races ever since. So to make a long story short here, when those units were selling at 170 and I was down $40,000, not once did I ever think about selling. Why would I? I had a quality tenant in there that was paying me a good rent. I was getting cash flow from the property. The price of the property didn't make any difference to me at that point because I wasn't interested in selling. I buy my properties and hold them for 20, 30 years until the mortgage is paid off at least. Then I might consider shuffling them around or selling them to open up some more capital. But it never occurred to me once to sell it. Now I can tell you, today those units are selling, I don't know, probably in the low $700,000 range. I'll give you one last example here, a more recent example. In 2008, I bought a one-bedroom, one-bath condo on Beatty Street in the Crosstown neighborhood. Really nice boutique building that I wanted to get into. The market was ultra hot, and I actually ended up buying the unit as an assignment from a lady who had bought 3 of these units. She sold all 3. I bought one, and I sold one other to another investor client of mine, and the third one she sold to somebody else. She paid $299,000 for this unit. I paid $358,000 for my unit. So this lady made $60,000 as an assignment, and I know she was giddy about it. She sold 3 of them. So she made $175,000 for essentially doing nothing. She bought the properties. At that time, it was a 5% down payment, for God's sake, and then flipped them 6 months later and made $150,000. She thought she'd made off like a bandit. Now, I can tell you, that was 2008. 6 months after I bought the unit, put a tenant in it, the market started to slow. And I can tell you, just like clockwork, I would say within 2 years after I bought it, that unit was probably worth somewhere around $330,000. So probably $25,000, $30,000 less than what I had paid for the unit at the time. Again, did I care about what the price was? Not at all. We're only into the first inning of the game. I'm going to play 9 innings. I had a good tenant in there. I was getting a nice rent check every month. It didn't matter to me. And so I can tell you, I don't need to make a long story short, the market went down. It treaded water for a little while, took back off again in 2009, 2010. And then in 2012, we had another bit of a correction where the price went down 10%, and then it's been on a rocket ride ever since. Make a long story short again, those units now in this building, when one does come up for sale, it's a rare sale in there because there's so few units, maybe one a year comes up. The last one in there sold for close to $600,000. So the point I'm making here is that as a realtor, as an investor with 30 years experience, I don't try and time markets. So why would you try and time the market? I just systematically buy. I don't care whether we're in a seller's market, a buyer's market, a balanced market. If the numbers make sense, if it's a unit that I like and want to add to my portfolio in a neighborhood that I want to be in, and I'll do the research on what I can get for rent on it, I'm going to pull the trigger and buy it. And if the market goes down a year or 2 years after I bought it, that's fine. We're only in the first inning. I'm going to hold it for 9 innings or longer. So, that's the way to think. Don't worry about the short-term market fluctuations here. Buy and hold it for 8 to 10 years, and it's foolproof. It really is. Hope some of this sheds a little more light on my thinking. Again, I dedicate a chapter and a half on this in my new book, and I'll walk you through some of the steps and the psychology that you need to have. You've got to think long term. If you're going to get your money to work for you, I've said this over and over on my blog here, you have to get comfortable with being a little bit uncomfortable, meaning that you have to participate in a market, whether that's the stock market or the real estate market. And those markets will not go up every year. It would sure be wonderful if they did, but they don't. We've been on a nice ride here for the last 3.5, 4 years now. Eventually this market is going to take a breather. The detached market already has, and prices are off 5, 6, 7%. The condo market really hasn't done that yet. It might, we'll have to see. You'll stay tuned for my blogs later this winter and this spring, but you'll be the first to know when I start to see the market turning. Eventually it's going to. But savvy investors, people that are buying a principal residence especially, just buy it. You need a roof over your head and hold it. Take the guesswork and the market timing out of it. That's what I do. That's what my other successful investment clients do as well. I'm Owen Bigland. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.